Welcome to video number 27 in the Using iTrain tutorial series. My name is Bob. In this tutorial we provide an introduction to automatic routing. We'll discuss what an automatic route is and what it can and cannot do. We'll look at the essential role of stations in automatic routes, and we'll describe the things that we need to consider in preparation for creating and defining stations. Welcome back. So far in these tutorials we have covered 3 of the 4 types of routes used in iTrain: track routes, instant routes and train routes. Now we move on to the final type, automatic routing, perhaps the most sophisticated and ingenious of all the routes. Automatic routing is where we allow iTrain to take full control of a train or multiple trains, each with their own automatic route. There's no need for us to create a route and attach it to a train like we did with train routes. Instead, iTrain will determine its own route automatically based on the train type that we're using and on the settings in something called stations. And this then allows iTrain to more or less randomly drive around our layout. A station is a group of defined blocks denoted by a dashed line. We can see examples of stations in the demo layout here. Here we can see a station denoted by this black dashed line, which is encompassing these 3 sidings. And down here we have another station which is covering these 5 blocks here. In an automatic route, these stations tell iTrain where the train can stop, and it's up to iTrain to choose which of the blocks in that station it will stop the train at. What actually happens in an automatic route is that iTrain will look for all available paths from the current train position until it finds another station where it can wait, such as here. It may find multiple paths to the same station, or it might find paths to more than one station, but it then chooses a path. The path that it selects is determined by a number of different things. For example, the train type. If I go up to view and turn on the vehicles view again, we can see that for DBIC, this train here, its type is shuttle. And if we look in the train types editor, we can see that for the shuttle there are certain permissions that we can set here. So there may have been certain blocks that this type of train is not allowed access to, or blocks that it only has access to. And the train itself will have similar settings. So if we look at the train editor for DBIC, we see that the train itself also has these permissions which either allow or disallow trains to go into certain blocks. And the destination itself, for example the station here, will have settings that will influence the route. These are just some of the factors that can affect route selection. And the more options that iTrain has in terms of path selection, the greater variety we will get in the routes that iTrain can select in automatic routing. When it has selected the route, it then reserves as much of that path as it can. If some blocks are occupied, iTrain will look for alternative paths until it finally finds a route to arrive at the station where it can then wait. After waiting, the process repeats itself and iTrain then finds a path to the next station. In some cases, it will not find a station, but will instead find the same block where it started, such as in a circular route, in which case it starts the route again, but may then opt to choose a different path the next time. When we want to stop an automatic route, we can do it in different ways. We can stop the individual route by using the stop button, which will abruptly stop the train where it is, or we can use the finish option, which will allow the train to stop at the next station, or if it's already at the station, then it will stop there. Or we can use the finish all, which will stop all of the active routes at their next destination or station. Starting a route is very simple. If we go back to the vehicles view, just go to the train tab down here, make sure there is no route selected, and then press the start button. If you pressed the start button with a route selected like this, then you would not be starting an automatic route, you would be starting this particular train route, which is different, of course. If we now jump back to our test track, where we haven't yet defined any stations, you may still find that you can run an automatic route. For example, if I bring this train onto here and with no route selected press the start key, you'll see that it does actually reserve a path. But if we follow it along, what you'll see will typically happen is that iTrain will just continue to go round in a loop. But once we learn how to set up an automatic route properly, we'll be really fascinated by what it can achieve. More and more, I find myself going into my train room, turning on the layout, pressing the play buttons, and just sitting back with a coffee and watching the trains do their own thing. It is strangely satisfying and relaxing. Even though iTrain is doing all the driving and making all the decisions, the satisfaction comes from the knowledge that the system is working because of the way that you set everything up. And it's relaxing because iTrain has control of everything and is ensuring that all the trains are running safely without crashing. As I said earlier, multiple trains can be running automatic routes at the same time, but you can also simultaneously have other trains using any of the other 3 types of routes. And of course you can also run some trains manually if you wish to. So when you've finished your coffee, you can also start interacting with the layout. Stations are the essential component of automatic routing. Without them, automatic routing will not operate correctly because iTrain will not find anywhere to stop, and it will only see the starting block as its next destination. Hence why we saw the train run round in circles here. When we create a station, we define the type of station it will be. More on that later. We also define the blocks that the station contains and the type of blocks that can be used. And we define the type of trains that can use the station. iTrain then uses this information when it creates an automatic route to determine if that station can be used in the route, and if so, how it will be used by that particular train. For example, if we had an express passenger train, we might want it only to stop at main stations and to pass through country halts, and to never use a platform that is assigned for cargo. Or we may have a local passenger train that will always stop at every station on the route, but perhaps only at particular platforms. Or we may have a cargo train that we want to restrict to only stop at certain platforms or sidings and have a much lower priority compared to express trains when reserving a route. All of this intelligence will be used by iTrain to determine a path and provide variety in the routes that it selects. When we create stations, which we will do in the next tutorial, we define them using the stations editor, of course. And in here, when we create a new station, you'll see that there are different types of station to select from. A shadow station, passengers, cargo, shed, and one called other. A shadow station contains blocks that are of the type station or siding or both. A passenger station contains blocks that are only of the type station. A cargo station has blocks that are only the type siding, and a shed type has only siding blocks. And there is the other option which covers anything else not covered by any of the above. And just as a reminder, the block type is defined in the block itself, up here in the type drop down. And also we can tell what a block type is by the symbol that it's using. So a rectangle is a station block, the square is a free track, the diamond is a siding. The types of station that we create determine how automatic routing will use those stations based on the type of train that we're using and other factors which we will go into in later tutorials. But there's a couple of things that it is important to bear in mind about automatic routes. Firstly, it is not possible to perform shunt maneuvers in automatic routing. So if you're using unidirectional trains, By that I mean steam locos or modern era diesels pulling coaches or wagons. Automatic routes are best suited to tail chaser or circuit type routes rather than end-to-end layouts. An end-to-end layout is perfectly fine if you're using bidirectional trains, in other words trains that have a control car at either end, such as with DMUs or EMUs or shuttle type trains. An end-to-end layout with steam trains or diesel trains with wagons and coaches can still use automatic routing, for example to take the train from one end of the layout to the other, but then some manual interaction needs to take place to allow the train to continue. However, automatic routes are able to use actions and relays, just like other routes. So we can still combine shunting maneuvers with automatic routing using things called actions and relays. This will allow us to jump from an automatic route to a shunting maneuver, for example something like a runaround operation, and then back to an automatic route whenever we want it to. But we will have to wait until future tutorials to see how this is done. For now, we keep automatic routes and shunting separate. Secondly, where possible, provide a wide variety of routing options in your layout. The more options iTrain has to select different train paths, the greater variety of running that can be achieved from the automatic route. On a simple layout with few options, iTrain tends to eventually lock itself into the same repeating circular path. So if you can, give it plenty of routing options to allow the routing to operate more effectively. If a train does lock itself into the same repeating loop, you can sometimes use a little trick, which is to instant route the train to another location and then reactivate automatic routing. So for automatic routing to operate effectively, we need to put a little thought into what we want to achieve and how we set up our stations and trains appropriately. Which means we need to be aware of the train types that we have created and which trains have those train types assigned to them. We can see the types of train that we have on our layout in the overview window here. So DB car is a cargo train, DBIC is a shuttle train, DB Pole, the steam train, is our intercity express passenger train, and the class 33 D6510 we've assigned as a local passenger train. We saw earlier that the train type can be used to determine what blocks it can and cannot go into, but it also influences the reserve count that the route can plan ahead of itself, and you can set priorities that that train type has in terms of reserving the block, and you can determine whether the train is aligned to a platform when it stops at a station, or whether it just stops at the end or start of a particular block. So hopefully you're beginning to see how we can influence how iTrain determines a particular route and how that route will be used. To better demonstrate stations and automatic routing, you may have noticed that I've made some changes to the test layout here. So we now have this effective reversing loop section here with a block called loop station. I've added a new section down here called down under 1 and an associated passing loop called down under 2. And as a result of creating this section here, I needed to create two new blocks, DU West for down under West and DUE for down under East here. And I've made South Platform 2 into a passing loop by adding this turnout, which takes it back on to the main line. These additional sections will give us greater variety in the automated routing that iTrain can use. You should be familiar with how to add these additional sections, so I'm not going to show them in this tutorial. But remember to run the diagnostics afterwards in the view menu here to make sure that there are no errors when you've completed the changes. Okay, I think that is more than enough for this video. That was a lot to take in. In the next video, we'll actually start creating and defining our stations and then optimizing the settings so that automatic routes do the things that we want them to do. So I hope to see you then. In the meantime, think about how you want your particular route to run automatic routing. And if you're following along with the test track here, you can make the changes that I have made to this one and check that they're working. Thanks for watching.